Yep, today we're talking about breathing.
What? I thought this podcast was supposed to be about stuff pilots do.
Indeed, you are correct, young listener. Of course pilots breathe, but more specifically, pilots are taught to breathe at very specific times and for very specific reasons. And it's not just pilots. Hello everybody, I'm Phil Wilkes. Welcome aboard the Like a Pilot podcast, where we unveil the soft skills pilots utilise every time they strap into those high-speed aluminium and carbon fibre giants we call airliners. This show is your ticket to understanding the how and why behind what makes aviation one of the safest modes of travel. So it's time to fasten your seatbelts and join me now as we embark on a journey through the skies, where pilot skills become the blueprints for high performance in any field. This month's episode is part 2 of our 2-part investigation into bouncing back from startle and surprise, an important skill not just in aviation, but in many high-stress environments, especially where quick decision-making may be required. In part 1, we examined a few aviation accidents that showed reacting to startle and surprise without pausing to recognise and confirm what's happening can have life or death implications. We explored how taking the time to go through recognition and confirmation phases allows us to make a considered response, or even revert to a pre-planned protocol, like a memory checklist. In part 2, we're moving beyond this cognitive response to startle and surprise and adding a layer, a simple yet highly effective physiological method for resetting cognitive control. At first glance, you might think this technique doesn't warrant an episode of its own. But airlines train pilots to use it, athletes use it, and the US Navy SEALs use it so they can function in volatile situations. It's not just about recovering from startle and surprise either. This technique can also help with managing fear, stress, and even phobias. After we dive into the science and technique, I'm confident you'll want to add it to your own toolkit. Our previous episode began with a disclaimer.
Warning. The following podcast contains interesting facts and loud noises that may startle and surprise listeners. Those with heart conditions, a nervous disposition, or currently operating a motor vehicle should proceed with caution, or perhaps with a firm grip on their armrests. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, pull over, folks. We're going there again. Let me bring you in from the ledge. When I say go, without breathing in first, I want you to breathe out, using your diaphragm to squeeze all of the air out of your lungs. When there's no air left, stop pushing and let the in-breath happen all by itself. Ready? Go. And again. Go. And one more time. Go. Now, just breathe normally. Feeling more relaxed? Okay, let's move on. As we discovered in our previous episode, startle is our instinctive, involuntary response to a sudden, intense stimuli, such as a loud noise or sudden movement. Our startle response prepares us for potential danger. Our reaction to startle is closely related to our reaction to fear. The general consensus among psychologists and neuroscientists is that humans are born with 2 primary instinctive fears designed to help us survive in the wild. The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Maybe you have recent experience with this one. Beyond these 2 primary innate fears, all of our other fears and phobias are learned responses, overgeneralizations from a particular past event. Maybe you had a bad encounter with a vicious dog. And now you're scared of even the tiniest of chihuahuas. Or maybe In the past, you were judged in a social context and now have a fear of being the centre of attention. The fear of public speaking is a very common anxiety. Fears and phobias may inhibit our ability to rationalise about the reality of the danger we're facing. We just feel the fear. So why do we have these very physical reactions? In the most primitive part of our brain resides a region known as the amygdala. Based on past experiences, our amygdala rapidly processes sensory input and, if it senses a threat, triggers an automatic response. Now, this can go one of two ways. It can trigger a freeze response, overwhelming us to the extent we freeze up and can't respond. Stage fright, anyone? Or it can trigger a fight or flight response. If the amygdala overrides the prefrontal cortex, that part of our brain responsible for rational thinking and decision making, we call this amygdala hijack. It can lead us to taking inappropriate, impulsive actions. In the previous episode, we looked at an incident involving a Greek government aircraft being operated by Olympic Airways. On descent into Bucharest, the crew inadvertently disengaged the autopilot. The captain reacted immediately and excessively, subjecting the aircraft to extreme G-forces that exceeded the safe limits of the aircraft. So extreme, they exceeded the normal operating range of the average roller coaster. Unrestrained passengers were thrown around the cabin, and tragically, 7 of the 13 people on board lost their lives. Beyond highlighting why airlines emphasise keeping seatbelts fastened during flight, this incident demonstrated how reacting before recovering from startle can lead to poor decisions and adverse outcomes. And this isn't the end of the potential issues. Startle, surprise, stress can also inhibit memory. Bad enough being on stage and suddenly forgetting your lines, or drawing a blank in an exam. Worse still if you have over 500 people sitting behind you relying on you to remember a memory checklist. The good news is that there is a simple and immediate way to control the physical reactions associated with startle, fear, anxiety, or stress, reducing amygdala arousal and putting us back onto the path of control. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's a technique so powerful that pilots use it, athletes use it, and the US Navy SEALs include it as one of the big 4 essential skills designed to help them stay focused, composed, and resilient under extreme pressure. Is called breathing.
Really? Breathing? That's the solution you're offering?
Yes, absolutely. Stick with me on this one. Controlled breathing activates our parasympathetic nervous system, reducing our heart rate and blood pressure, allowing our body to return to a baseline. And by increasing oxygen flow to the prefrontal cortex, we re-engage the part of our brain we're relying on for cognitive rather than instinctive functioning, rational rather than reactive decision making.
Surely there is more to this than just breathing. I'm breathing right now.
Well, continuing to breathe is a start, but yes, there are specific breathing techniques people use to control emotions and maintain focus. Box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, tactical breathing, and mindful breathing are just 4 examples. But my own personal favourite? When the air horn went off, did you notice anything particular about your breathing? Maybe something you see people do in horror movies? Breathing in or holding our breath is a normal physical reaction when we're frightened or panicked. It's an automatic response. To aid in our recovery from startle, fear, or stress, we can learn to do the opposite. Breathe out, repeating the pattern we accomplished together at the beginning of this episode. A fun fact, normal breathing never fully empties the lungs. There's always air left. We can always breathe out. And exhaling completely naturally triggers a deep in-breath, helping reset our breathing rhythm. Breathing out 3 times to reset our breathing is a simple, immediate way to reduce amygdala arousal and allow re-engagement of our prefrontal cortex. And maybe you can think of using this technique as a tactical pause. It buys you time to overcome amygdala hijack while you assess a situation, instead of reacting hastily and potentially escalating the problem, if indeed there's a problem at all.
And you're saying that pilots are actually trained to do this?
Along with recognizing and confirming what we're dealing with? Absolutely. A study sponsored by the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, specifically mentions Air France, Lufthansa, British Airways, and Air New Zealand as airlines that promote breath control in theoretical training as a means of stress management. Australia's Qantas Airways takes this one step further and practically trains taking a breath as part of their recovery actions from potential aircraft upsets and stall conditions. Practice is key here. Just like physical training, cognitive training, that is a change in behaviour, needs time and many repetitions to yield benefits and increase performance. Like any skill, practicing this technique helps condition your response so it's automatic when you need it, whether you're dealing with startle, fear, phobias, or performance stress. Startle, fear, and nerves are a normal response to potential risk, real or imagined. They're rooted in our evolutionary survival instincts. They're our body's way of staying alert, but they don't need to control you. So, the next time you're feeling overwhelmed, whether you're climbing a ladder, staring down a spider, or drawing a blank on stage, try this. Take 3 breaths out. No more, no less. Give yourself a tactical pause. Hey, thanks for the warning, body. I've got this now. That's all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this 2-part exploration of overcoming startle and surprise. The list of listener-requested episodes is growing. Keep those suggestions flowing. You can reach out via the contact link on our webpage, philwilkes.com/podcast. While you're there, check out our show notes for links to resources. And if you'd like to support the Like a Pilot podcast, head to our Patreon page at patreon.com/likeapilot. The Like a Pilot podcast is written and produced by me, Phil Wilkes. Additional voice talent, Ava Wilkes and Lewis Wilkes. Until next time, thanks for listening to the Like a Pilot podcast. If you've liked the show, tie your friends up, make them listen. Or you could always just rate, share and review.